out with the lovely Aaliyah. What's going on, Aaliyah?
What's up? How you doing? I'm good. Been a while, sure.
And he was working with R. Kelly, and they were making so many records together. You know, they made all those records together. They both Aaliyah. They shared so much in common.
The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker. Every whisper echoed like a shout, every glance loaded with the weight of 1,000 accusations. Sean Diddy Combs sat rigid, the posture of a man trying to hold his empire together as it threatened to collapse. But all eyes were locked on JayZ. The scene was surreal, like watching a chessboard flip mid-game. Diddy's move to name one of the world's most influential cultural figures wasn't just bold, it was explosive. This wasn't a legal defense. It was mutual destruction in motion. If Diddy was falling, he wasn't falling alone. And JayZ, long seen as untouchable, had just been pulled into the fight of his life.
Today, in a New York federal courtroom, Sean Diddy Combs told the judge he was, quote, a little nervous. Rap mogul's criminal trial began this morning. He is trafficking, racketeering, and more.
Diddy's accusations weren't vague suggestions, they were precision-guided bombshells. His legal team went straight for the jugular, claiming JayZ wasn't just a passive figure in their shared past, but an active player in dealings that reached far beyond music. Court filings painted a damning portrait: undisclosed financial transactions, secretive partnerships, and shadowy ties to events long rumored but never proven. This wasn't the usual drama over royalties or intellectual. These were allegations laced with deeper implications, ones that threatened to shake the very core of JayZ's empire.
Unfortunately, we're all going to take a disgusting trip to his seedy, awful world. You know, the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done.
Then came the lawsuit's ghosts, from JayZ's past, rising at the worst possible moment. One case, in particular, stood out. A woman accused him of horrific acts at a party in the early 2000s, a claim amplified by the backdrop of Diddy's growing legal chaos. Though she later dropped the suit, blaming her lawyer for pressuring her into it, the damage had already been done. The case's mix of contradictions and disturbing claims left a mark that no legal defense could fully wipe away. For JayZ, always balancing mystique and transparency became a PR nightmare of the highest order.
This morning, rap mogul JayZ is denying allegations he assaulted a 13-year-old girl alongside rapper Sean Diddy Combs. That civil lawsuit filed against Combs in October was amended Sunday to include JayZ. The accuser, identified only as Jane Doe, said she was assaulted by both men.
The cracks in his carefully crafted image didn't end there. Diddy's lawyers spared no effort in re-examining JayZ's beginnings, recasting his ascent from the Marcy projects as far less heroic than believed. They unearthed tales from his teenage years, backroom deals, and the very acumen he once praised as his business edge. Diddy's team argued those talents, measured risk-taking, and spotting opportunities others ignored had been weaponized well beyond legal bounds. Wasn't merely a character attack, was an effort to rewrite his entire legacy.
The question is he a criminal? You know, is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law.
For JayZ's legal team, the stakes couldn't have been higher. They weren't just defending a man, but a brand, an empire, stretching across music, fashion, sports, and more. As they worked to push back against the claims, they faced a growing pile of circumstantial evidence that, though not conclusive, was damaging in its sheer volume. Even his most devoted fans began to question, could all of this really be coincidence? The allegations were too broad, the ties too complex. Suddenly, every part of his empire seemed exposed to relentless scrutiny.
Because we now know who all the prosecutors will be on Diddy's trial. They're all women. They assembled a team of female prosecutors, and that is definitely not by accident.
And then came the betrayal the knife Diddy had so publicly driven into JayZ's back. Their bond had always been a complex mix of friendship and rivalry, played out in both headlines and boardrooms. They built their empires side by side, often competing but always bound by an unspoken code of the game. Now, with Diddy's allegations out in the open, that code was broken. The courtroom turned into a spectacle, with two hip-hop giants clashing in a war driven by both pride and self-preservation. What made the betrayal sting even more was the timing. The music world was already rocked by scandal, its glossy surface stripped back to reveal a much darker core. Diddy's downfall marked another chapter in a long line of fallen icons and, now, with JayZ dragged into the mess, the industry had to ask itself a hard question. How far did the corruption reach? For years, JayZ stood apart, seen as the one who rose above it all. But as Diddy's claims kept surfacing, it became clear no one, not even him, was beyond the fallout.
And what's really going to be interesting is the parade of celebrities who we expect to be mentioned and or called into that courtroom. The people who we hadn't heard about prior, like Mike Myers, Austin Powers, Mike Myers. Why is he getting called? Why is he on the witness list? That'll be fascinating. And then, of course, there are the no-name, quote unquote, women who are going to have to find every ounce of courage they have.
Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy hit a boiling point. Headlines blared betrayal, corruption, and the collapse of a friendship once thought unbreakable. Social media swirled with conspiracy theories, each wilder than the last. Some argued Diddy's claims were a strategic move to shift focus from his own legal woes, while others took JayZ's silence as a sign of guilt. The truth, as always, was more complex, but nuance held little weight in the court of public opinion. Did matter were the optics? And for JayZ, they were a disaster. The lawsuits were only the start. As more information came to light, it exposed an industry fueled by secrecy and ruthless ambition, where loyalty was often a disposable currency. JayZ's name now hovered over allegations spanning decades, from financial misconduct to whispered ties to some of music's darkest chapters. And while his legal team fought to dismiss the accusations as unfounded, the sheer breadth of them made it hard not to wonder if there was more beneath the surface.
So why does it all come to a head now? Why now? Why?
Because he's the acceptable monster at this time, like R. Kelly was the last time I sat on this couch.
So who's next?
Y'all don't see the lineup?
Yeah, we see the lineup. I'm just waiting to see who's next.
Even JayZ's most loyal defenders had to reckon with the weight of the allegations. For years, he had been the blueprint, a symbol of what could be achieved when raw talent met unrelenting ambition. Now, that blueprint was unraveling piece by piece. The accusations didn't just call his past into question. They targeted his present, the empire he had built, and the tactics he had used to hold it together. As the courtroom drama intensified, it became clear this was more than a legal dispute, was a reckoning for an entire industry. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. Business allies began to pull back, unwilling to be dragged into the storm. Fans, once steadfast in their support, started to question the image they'd long revered. For JayZ, the stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about defending his name, was about preserving a legacy crafted over decades. But as pressure mounted and the scrutiny deepened, one question loomed above it all. How much longer could he hold the line before everything collapsed? The answer, it seemed, lay not in the court filings, but in the shadows, where long-buried truths were finally surfacing.
Centerpieces of a lot of what happened during direct testimony were freakouts. And what the prosecution tried to show was that he forced and or coerced her into doing these freakouts. And we talked about this earlier this week, that at least my opinion is that in a lot of these, the prosecution didn't close the loop. It was something she felt.
Just when you thought the scandal couldn't get any darker, it did. The courtroom battles were only the start of a descent into the shadowy depths of the music industry's darkest secrets, as JayZ and Diddy's legal teams exchanged blows in the spotlight. A more sinister story was emerging, one that went beyond lawsuits and personal feuds. It was about control, fear, and a culture of silence that kept the industry's skeletons locked away in a gilded closet. Now, let's turn to Ollie. Her name, her legacy, her tragedy. She's become a lightning rod for conspiracy theories. And with good reason, the whispers surrounding her fatal plane crash, the circumstances of her final days, and the people involved. This is where things get murky. Aaliyah was closely connected to many figures, now caught in scandal. Her partnerships, collaborations, even relationships trace back to the same circle of power players. Diddy was a frequent presence in her world. And JayZ, well, there are plenty of late 90s photos showing them looking far too cozy for comfort. But it's not just the photos. It's the timing, the ties, the way events seem to line up a little too perfectly. People ask, was Aaliyah's untimely death a tragic accident or something more deliberate? The theories may sound wild, but they gain traction for a reason. For years, insiders have hinted at a culture of exploitation in music, where artists, especially young, vulnerable ones, are treated as commodities before humans. Aaliyah wasn't an exception. Some say she was the blueprint of starlet with undeniable talent, guided or manipulated by powerful men who saw her as a tool. And when she was no longer useful, that's when the theories get darker.